Hello everyone, welcome to Over Analytical with Taven Jorgensen. I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'm hoping I will make this time valuable and useful for you. The goal of this podcast is to spread my philosophy of interest and curiosity around these complex and abstract ideas. I'm hoping to stimulate and grow the conversation on these matters. I think it has a lot of benefit, and I think you'll see that if you stick around and listen. I hope you're all having a fabulous day. Thank you for pursuing my second podcast. I hope you enjoyed the first one. The theme of my podcast is sort of advancing the conversation and trying to provide my insight on the world and my perspective to a broader audience so that they can hopefully apply these ideas and really kind of test them and see if they really work and see if I'm really onto something, or hopefully improve on them and advance them for the benefit of the future. So today what I'm going to talk about is sort of like future outlook, kind of life advice, sort of what I think, reflecting on my personal success and what I think attributed to it, and sort of what I think going forward will attribute to it further, and what I think someone can kind of take home with and walk away with tangibly is like, oh, maybe this will affect the way I can change my behavior and I can optimize my future. So that's sort of what I'm going to try to provide for you today. So the first kind of thing is, obviously, I'm a 20-year-old college student. My experience in life is very limited. And because of that, I can only offer you so much insight to a perspective that is informed but is not nearly informed on some of the issues that you might have to encounter and some of the other hurdles that a lot of other individuals have to encounter. So by no means do I mean to come off in a condescending way or in a way that I even have it figured out, because I'm just trying to figure it out like everybody else. And this is sort of, I guess, the best example of what I think I got figured out. So I guess I'll sort of start with in high school my success, because I did succeed in high school. I think there's a lot of metrics to sort of define success. It's not necessarily all based on your academic performance. There's a few other things like how you develop socially, how you, I don't know per se, it's just your mindset is really molded then, and it's the sort of direction you put yourself in at such a young age. It's so important for the trajectory of where you're going that I think when I really reflect on what I did in high school, I'm more proud of the decisions I made and the conscious sacrifice I made than not. So I guess I'll sort of get into that. When I was in high school, I actually graduated with a 3.75 GPA and had an honors diploma. I had about 75 college credits accumulated. So I'd effectively skipped about 2 years in college. So how did I do it? Because it sounds a lot more daunting, and it sounds like it gives me a lot more credibility than it really should. And I'm going to break it down for you. So basically what I did was I found this opportunity to trade off my high school classes for college classes. I knew I was going to college, and I knew I was probably doing something related to business. So there was a pretty successful catalog of classes I could pick from that I could take at community college at night or an extra time or over the summer or something. And then it turns out that those courses were actually less time committed than high school courses, had better professors and teachers, which further aided in a quicker development around my mindset around these very complex issues such as economics, finance, business, etc. So because I was doing that, what it appeared to be was I was working. So essentially what I would do was this is more specific to my spring term schedule, so my fall and winter terms were not nearly as horrific, but they were still a lot of intensive for my junior and senior year of high school at least. So I would wake up around 6:37. I would get ready for school, get to school by 7:40. I'd go to school from about 7:40 to lunch. I'd have lunch with my friends, and then I would go work for my family's business from about 12 to 5-ish. And then from about 5 o'clock, 4:30-ish, I would head to community college on the days or whenever I had it set, because I had a pretty flexible schedule that I could work around and really optimize my time. So because of that, I ended up taking these community college classes during my regular stuff, and I could actually use them to cancel out credits I needed to complete in high school. So on paper, it looks like I'm doubling up and getting an honors diploma and doing all these fantastic things while completing community college classes. But in reality, I'm really just taking a lazier opportunity to get more done with less effort. And I guess I've always sort of jokingly had an immature mindset around what that really means, but I sort of think that's what defines intelligence, is your most effective path for problem solving and the means that your process goes through to really figure that out and optimize the solution and get the best reward for yourself. Because that's all we're trying to do essentially, is we're all just picking what we think the best decision for ourselves is, and we don't really necessarily always pick right, but that's what the goal is. So I that's what I think should be strived for. I think trying to sharpen your mind and trying to figure these things out and achieve a more optimal solution that yields a better future for you and the loved ones around you and the people around you. And I think that's all we can really try to do as humans. But kind of back to the point of, it's interesting the mindset that when it comes to approaching matters of sort of time management and logic, and you sort of notice, like, well, first of all, you can talk back to IQ and the importance of that, but delayed gratification is the true key in that. And it sort of comes back to time management. The way that I best kind of approach this topic is I view everything I do in a day-to-day as if it has a positive and a negative benefit. Whether I'm putting off my homework now to do it later so I can enjoy playing a video game now or play basketball now or whatever it is I'm doing, I'm consciously deciding that I'm going to enjoy the gratification now rather than suffer through the homework to enjoy it on the end. Well, if you really net positive and net negative all of these kind of calculations of what is the added stress subconsciously, how is that going to affect your mood, what is that going to do to you, is it good or is it bad? Is it going to be more stressful in the long term by not just doing it in the beginning? Which I think most of us can realize that it will. And we can realize, like, if you take this logical approach to evaluating the amount of time you have, you'll realize that you should be making a list of the things you should do that will most make you feel better right now. Like, what's the biggest thing weighing down on you? It's often probably a major report or some big project, something you're putting off, something, maybe your workout schedule, your diet schedule, something you're putting off that would make you feel better and put you in a better situation tomorrow that you've assigned the burden of overcoming is too hard today and you want to do it later. But by pushing that burden off, you're actually creating a bigger burden for yourself and creating a bigger hurdle to overcome. And if you really believe that activity is beneficial for you, then what better time to start than right now, right? Why wouldn't you want to maximize how good you can really feel in the future and really what you're doing? And this is sort of the idea around delayed gratification that I think is so important. And there's a classic test, the marshmallow test, where they tested children. I can't remember exactly how old the children were, but essentially what they did was they put a marshmallow on a plate in front of them, and they said, I'm going to leave the room as a researcher, and all you have to do is not touch the marshmallow, and I'm going to come back, and if I find the marshmallow is untouched, then you'll get another marshmallow. So a logical, rational kid would realize that if they waited and delayed the instant gratification, they'd actually reap more gratification in the long term. And then they found that the kids who actually ate the marshmallow long term tested a lot worse and ended up a lot worse off. And we found that this delayed gratification thing is really highly associated with success and sort of building a positive mindset, I guess. So I think it's really important. So a way that I sort of like to think about it, and I've heard it's not my original idea by any means, but it hasn't been really shared around enough like I think it should. I think that you should really kind of approach caring for yourself as if you're caring for your kids or someone you really care about, or even an animal. There's actually a lot of research that shows, as like crazy as this may seem, that humans are actually better at giving their pets pills on time over taking them themselves on time. We care more about the well-being and safety of canines and cats than we do about ourselves, which doesn't really make any sense. But I think if you really kind of look at these behaviors we have, you'll notice how really toxic we are to ourselves, and we really do beat ourselves up a lot more than we necessarily have to. So I think if we kind of present these things and what's going on here, and we sort of spread this idea around to more people, we can lift these burdens that are unnecessary off of people, and it'll be a big benefit going forward. But I guess, so we'll sort of talk about how patternized behavior works. So patternized behavior, it basically works as a feedback loop. So essentially, you can think about when you train a dog. So, for example, dogs operate very efficiently on this sort of idea of a feedback loop. So what you do is you get them, you say their name, or you say something that signals a behavior. When they repeat the behavior, you reward the behavior with a treat. And then that subconsciously encourages the dog to keep repeating the behavior, because it's this feedback loop of obtaining the dopamine once it realizes it has the potential to get it. Essentially, every form of addiction operates at manipulating this feedback loop. Fast food addiction is a very good example of this. When you walk into a Burger King or McDonald's, have you ever noticed how the environment is very specifically the same? Have you ever noticed how it usually smells the same? All the colors are the same, the menus are laid out the same. It's very interesting, conforming to a very specific standard. But have you really kind of considered why that is and what they're doing? But effectively, what they're trying to do is, when you go in and you create and you interact with them, they're trying to market this in a way, or they're trying to utilize these subconscious impulses you have in addiction to reinforce that addiction by using these smells, looks, feels, all these things that you don't necessarily interpret consciously that manipulate your opinion into being that trigger that sets off that dopamine feedback loop that requires you to fulfill the order of getting more of the fast food thing you want. And that's sort of, it operates in fast food, it operates in drugs, it operates in social media to the same degree. Essentially, what you're doing on social media is you're getting stimulation, you're getting likes, you're getting interaction, and your brain's dopamine sensors, they love this, they enjoy it, it's shooting it all over the place, but it's manipulative, because now when your brain has a deficit of it because it's overstimulated it currently, it's going to want to get more. And what have you correlated as an automated trigger for more dopamine with your social media circumstance? Have you ever found yourself just pulling your phone out and looking at an app and just logging into it and not really aimlessly thinking about what you're doing? Effectively, that app has programmed your brain to play off of a feedback loop to manipulate your behavior to get you to utilize their app or buy their products more. This is a really, really scary thing. And I think it's why we see this trend of a lot of the major technology company CEOs actually not allowing their children to have anything to do with social media from a lot more exaggerated age than what the general population sees as acceptable. What we're doing to kids, essentially, I can't remember where I heard this from. It was not my original idea by any means, but I'll probably, if I can find it, put a video in the description. But effectively, they compared the brain scans of kids who were utilizing social media in these things, and they compared them to kids that were, or they compared them to, I believe it was drug users of something very extreme stimulants or something. And you found that the way a drug user looks, their brain looks on a scan with a stimulant in their system, is the same exact thing we're doing to children with social media at a young age. And then that addiction is forming at such a young age in such a crucial developmental time. Who knows if any of us will ever really actually be able to remove it from ourselves and get around it. But it's this feedback loop, and acknowledging these subconscious behavior, these subconscious kind of manipulators and pushers and pullers that you have going on all the time, because it's really true. You subconsciously want to look at your phone all the time because of the triggers that they've created for you. You want to eat at certain restaurants all the time because of the trigger of the smell of the Auntie Anne's pretzel or whatever it is. But it's a lot more complicated than that, and these are just the face value ones that even I can observe. And I imagine when you get even to a more complex level of microbiology, you'll find that there's an even more complicated sphere of what's going on to manipulate our direct behavior. But I think there's a lot of value in realizing that these things are things that affect you. These things can bring down your mood, they can lift up your mood, they can change the outcourse of your life really, really significantly if you aren't conscious of how they can affect you and really how to control them. Because that's sort of what I think you can do, I guess. Because that's the sort of the wisdom that I guess I was instilled with was I watched this interesting video where it sort of discussed the idea of seeking mentorship and how you never really know who you're going to talk to and how they're going to enlighten you and how they're going to change your life. So, with that given, you should try to create every encounter positively as you can. And that means developing social skills, that means developing verbal skills, that means really elaborating on ideas and being someone who's interesting and fun and positive to be around, because that's a fostering environment. But this video I'm specifically referencing, they were talking about how the effects of not being sociable on children is so significant, because when you're a child, the influences you're taking in is not just your parents. It's most significantly your parents, but there's a lot of other things at play that are going on that could really impact the development of your kid. And one of the most beneficial of those things is interaction with other adults outside of your parents. It's really, really important for kids to be stimulated on this level by other individuals who can bring more diversity of thought to their developing brains. And it really makes sense when you lay it out that way. But if that's the truth, if it is really important to make your kids sociable, like, how important is it in those early days, and like what can you really do about it? And that's what I'm not really sure, but there is a clear line drawn in the sand. It's like everybody is a teacher, everybody is a mentor, and you want your kid to learn from every one of those opportunities that they can. So the goal really should be to create curiosity and to stem curiosity in this sort of way. And I guess that sort of starts to me with realizing how your subconscious physiology reacts and manipulates your conscious behavior. Because if you can really put your finger on how this does, then you can know when you're reacting subconsciously to something and it's going to affect you negatively, and you can sort of put it to the side and remove it. And you cannot let it bring you down and ruin the possible positive engagement you'll have that could lead to all kinds of opportunities. Because every single day you walk out, every single day you meet somebody, you have this opportunity to change your life and to meet somebody who could really change the way your outlook is and the way you view the world, and it could be for the better if you're seeking to try to improve in that direction. And these subconscious burdens that just make us so unbearable and make us so miserable, and like, we've all been there, we've all been tired, we've all been groggy, we've all been in a mood where we weren't ideal socially, and we need to be more cautious of when we are in these moods, because we could be doing a lot of long-term damage to ourselves. It sort of circles back to who you surround yourself with as an individual, because there's a lot of research that shows that you either go up or you go down depending who you surround yourself with. And like, I guess sort of what I mean about that is like your ambition. If you surround yourself with burnout stoners that smoke pot all day and don't actually go out and ever do anything and don't want to ever explore or start anything, you're eventually going to conform to that social behavior because it's in your most natural inhibition to do so. You have this groupthink sort of natural circuitry that's pushing you to want to be accepted and want to be alike. So if you consciously put yourself in situations with people you don't want to be like, that maybe you enjoy being around, you run a significant risk of conforming to the negative behavior that you don't want anything to do about it. It's interesting because you can see these sort of trends in socioeconomic behavior and sort of how people interact with each other, and you find that typically friend groups are made up of people that are of very similar socioeconomic status. And at the face value, this makes a lot of sense just for the nature of what their spending habits are and how much resource and money they have access to. It makes sense that rich kids will get into snowboarding, get into skiing more likely, and meet other rich kids doing that. And that's, or lacrosse, or whatever XYZ hobby you want to talk about. There's certain hurdles that other groups of people can't get into because of that. But there's something else going on there too, because it is that money, it is that thing, but it's also sort of this matching of ambition and drive, I guess. Because I'm not suggesting that the reason that a lower income person hangs out with low income people is because they have a lack of drive or anything by any means. It's not to pick any empirical example like that would be lunacy, and to prescribe that sort of mindset onto anybody would not be a fair representation by any means. But it is important to notice that we do like to challenge ourselves. We do like to build on what we have, and curiosity and learning are a default setting with this kind of physiology that we have. And if you sort of set yourself up to be around people that can grow, but not sort of, because it has to be a sustainable growth rate like most things. If you grow too quickly, you run the risk of, like, I guess it's not necessarily you run the risk, but you could be turned off to the overwhelming nature of how complicated it can be to get up to somebody's level on certain issues and certain concepts. And that's sort of backwards to what we would really want to move in the direction of. You want to challenge yourself, and we all sort of gravitate towards a group that challenges us, but not too much. And this is important, because it's important because it directly correlates to who you surround yourself with. And you have a direct effect on that. You get to decide who you interact with every day. You might not really think about it this way, but who you talk to every day, who you interact with every day, really does impact the state of your sort of existence long term. Like there's a lot of research that shows that if you surround yourself with negative, toxic people that are unmotivated, you sort of conform to the behavior. Whether it's a fault of your own and whether it happens overnight is obviously sort of irrelevant, but we see this long-term trend in this direction. So if you can consciously control putting yourself around people who are motivated, ambitious, interesting, curious, then you should do it, because that effect is really contagious, and that effect, it plays itself out over a long term, and it's a very small step to basis. But if you really look at across the spectrum of data of what we've observed, you can really see this correlation, and you can see this thing that matters. So if you can consciously decide who you surround yourself with, and you know that has an effect on who you become, why would you not try to improve your future?
You just listened to the Analytical podcast, where all opinions are subject to change when presented with better or more adequate information. Taven does not seek to be right, but to find the objective truths to further develop the conversation.